So what's the deal with sugar? One day you read a headline saying it's as addictive as cocaine, and the next day you hear that's just a myth. It's confusing, right? Well, today we're going to cut right through all that noise. We're going to break down the science, the controversy, and maybe most importantly, the practical stuff you actually need to know. Okay, let's get into it. To really get a sense of the stakes here, just look at this quote. Major global health organizations are calling sugar the new tobacco. Now, that's not just a catchy soundbite. They are deliberately comparing it to one of the biggest public health disasters in history. That's how seriously some experts are taking this. And this right here, this is the core of the debate. The comparison to hard drugs is what really gets people fired up. The idea that sugar can hijack your brain in the same way as cocaine. I mean, is that actually true? Is there real science behind that? Or is it just hype? That's the big question we're tackling today. To do that, we first have to agree on what we even mean by sugar, right? So, to get to the bottom of this, we have to get really specific. Because when you hear scientists talking about the dangers of sugar, they're not talking about the piece of fruit you just ate. Nope, they're focused on something very, very different. And here it is, the crucial distinction. We're talking about added sugars. This is the stuff that's put into food during processing. Think about the high fructose corn syrup in your soda, the sugar in your ketchup, the honey in your cereal. It's not the sugar that's naturally part of a whole apple. This is the stuff that's added in, and it's the main character in our story today. So why is this added sugar such a big deal? Well, a huge part of the answer is how our body processes it. Most added sugar is a mix of these two things, glucose and fructose. Now, glucose on the left, that's your body's main fuel. It powers everything, and really importantly, it sends a signal to your brain that says, hey, you're full. Fructose, though, that's a whole different ballgame. It pretty much gets a VIP pass straight to your liver, which can turn it into fat. And it does all this without really telling your brain that you've had enough to eat. That difference is absolutely key to this whole conversation. Okay, so we know how it affects the body, but let's move upstairs to the brain. We all know sugar tastes good, but what is actually happening in our heads when we eat it? This is where we get into the brain's reward system, this incredibly powerful network that basically drives us to, well, do everything. And the star of this show is a little chemical called dopamine. When you eat something sweet and delicious, your brain gets a nice hit of it. Dopamine is what gives you that feeling of pleasure, and its main job is to tell your brain, hey, that was awesome. Remember exactly what you just did and do it again. It's the brain's fundamental way of getting us to repeat behaviors that are good for survival. And it's the exact same pathway that lights up from exercise, music, and yes, drugs. This isn't just a theory. We can literally see it happen. This brain scan right here is showing the brain is reward center just lighting up after someone consumes some glucose. That bright glowing area, that's the dopamine rush in action. It's a powerful biological signal screaming, yes, more of that, please. And this is the evidence that sits right at the center of the addiction debate. So a substance hits the brain's reward system. Sounds like an open and shut case, right? Sugar is addictive, end of story. Well, not so fast. This is actually where we walk into one of the biggest, most heated arguments in all of nutrition science. So let's lay out the two sides. The case for addiction points to studies, mainly in rats, that are pretty dramatic. You give them sugar only sometimes, and they start to act like addicts. They binge, they show signs of craving, and in some wild studies, they'll actually choose the sweet taste over cocaine. But the case against addiction has some really strong points too. They argue that this only happens when the rat's access is restricted. If they can have sugar whenever they want, those behaviors tend to go away. And here's the kicker. Unlike a rat addicted to cocaine, a rat that wants sugar will stop trying to get it if you pair it with something bad. like a little electric shock. That suggests the compulsion just isn't in the same league. Okay, so the whole addiction label, it's messy. Scientists are still duking it out. But let's put that argument on the shelf for a second and talk about something they all agree on. Let's talk about what excessive sugar does to your physical health, because here, the science is crystal clear. And here is the bottom line. You can call it an addiction, a bad habit, whatever you want. It doesn't change the fact that the scientific evidence is overwhelming. Eating too much added sugar is strongly linked to a whole laundry list of serious health issues. We're talking about everything from chronic inflammation and obesity to type 2 diabetes and heart disease. On this, there is no debate. This is just established science. And because these risks are so proven, the big global health players have put out some very clear advice. The World Health Organization, for example, says we should aim to get less than 10% of our daily calories from these added sugars. For most people, that's a pretty clear target to shoot for. All right, enough of the science and the debates. Let's get down to brass tacks. How do you actually put any of this into practice in the real world when you're standing in the middle of a grocery store and sugar is hiding in basically everything? Well, thankfully, the food label now has a really powerful shortcut. The magic number you need to know is 50 grams. The FDA uses that number as the 100% mark for your daily value of added sugars. It lines up pretty well with that 10% calorie goal from the WHO. So, you can think of 50 grams as your total daily sugar budget. And once you know your total budget, you get this incredibly simple rule of thumb. When you look at that nutrition label, find the percent daily value for added sugars. If one serving of that food has 5% or less, it's considered low in added sugar. Simple as that. And on the other end of the spectrum, if a single serving has 20% or more, boom, that's considered high in added sugars. That's it, the 5-20 rule. 5% is low, 20% is high. Honestly, that one simple trick is probably the most useful tool you have for navigating this stuff without driving yourself crazy. So, we've seen that the whole addiction thing is still being debated, but the health risks of eating too much sugar, they are undeniable. And all of this leaves us with one final and much bigger question. Knowing all this, whose job is it to fix the problem? Is it all on us as individuals to read the labels and make the right choices? Or do governments have a responsibility to step in? There is no easy answer here, but figuring out where that line is between personal responsibility and public health, that is the next great sugar debate. Thanks for watching.